podcast is going to be a summarization of my topic, the Writers Guild of America. I'm going to talk about the history of the Writers Guild of America, residuals, and the 2007-2008 strike. This podcast is intended to be used as an educational tool to inform those of the key issues of the most recent strike, which ended February 12, 2008. The Writers Guild of America is a general term that refers to the joint forces of two U.S. labor unions. The Writers Guild of America East, which represents TV and film writers around New York City, and the Writers Guild of America West, which represents TV and film writers in Hollywood and Southern California. Although each guild is independent from each other, they both take part in the Writers Guild of America Awards, which is an annual award show presented simultaneously on each coast. The Writers Guild of America Screenwriting Credit System, which determines how writers' names will be shown in the credits. The Writers Guild of America Registration Service, which is an online service to determine when scripts were written and by whom. And they are both members of the International Affiliation of Writers Guilds, which is an international trade union federation that represents professional playwrights and screenwriters. The Writers Guild of America's primary purpose is to represent writers of television and film and employees of television and radio news. In 1933, the Authors League of America and the Screenwriters Guild became one. In 1935, the National Labor Relations Act was passed and called for an election to represent writers of films in collective bargaining agreements. In 1951, the Authors League of America reorganized into the Writers Guild of America East and the Writers Guild of America West due to the increased amount and complexity of its members in the numerous fields of entertainment writing. These two guilds began to only represent writers of television, film, and radio, and they have been representing these writers since 1954. A residual payment is an ongoing stream of payments for the completion of past achievements. Residuals have been an ongoing issue throughout the past, and the WGA has protested this issue in previous strikes. There was a strike in 1960 and a strike in 1988 before the 2007-2008 strike. The 1960 WGA strike was the second longest strike in history. It lasted 20 weeks and 6 days. It was over the writer's right to receive a share of revenue of studios from the sale or lease of movies. 7 of the 8 major studios compromised and made a deal. The settlement included having the studios pay $600,000 into the writer's pension and health funds. They also agreed to give 5% of the studio's income from movies pre-1960 that were on television. Writers received 2% of income from post-1960 movies, and minimum rates were increased to $350 a week, and writers received a 10% raise for the first 2 years and then a 5% raise for the next year and a half. The 1988 WGA strike was the longest strike in history. It lasted 21 weeks and 6 days. Writers went on strike over the lack of residual payments for home video distribution. Entertainment companies argued that home video was an unproven market with an expensive delivery channel and paid writers a small percentage in residuals of each videotape sold. The WGA accepted the residual percentage of 0.3% of the first million of reportable gross and 0.36% of each tape sold. The 2007-2008 WGA strike lasted 14 weeks and 2 days. The strike was principally about compensation for DVD sales and new media. New media includes internet downloads such as on iTunes and online video streaming, which can be found on all the major network websites. The WGA requested that the residual rate for DVD sales be doubled, which would result in a residual rate of 0.6%, up from 0.3% per DVD sold. Streaming video, watching television shows online for free, is largely ad-supported. Varying degrees of built-in advertisements is a method used by all major networks. Because streaming video is so largely ad-supported, entertainment companies argue that the content broadcasted online is strictly promotional. Therefore, it does not fall under the jurisdiction of writers' royalties. The WGA proposed a 2.5% distributor's gross of income through the sales and distribution of digital media. The Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers have refused to address this proposal, and they continue to argue that the content broadcasted online is promotional and writers do not have the right to receive residuals on it. Another reason they deny residuals to writers for new media is the argument that there is no money to be made on the internet. It is an unproven source of income, sales, and profit. The strike began Monday, November 5th, 2007. It was against the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which is a trade organization for motion picture and television producers. The major corporations involved were CBS, NBC, Sony Pictures Entertainment, Fox, Paramount Pictures, Walt Disney, and Warner Brothers. Issues of the strike included DVD residuals, new media, and jurisdiction in reality and animation. Every 3 years, the Writers Guild negotiates a new basic contract with the AMPTP. This contract is called the Minimum Basic Agreement. In 2007, the negotiations of the Minimum Basic Agreement reached a dead end, and the WGA gave its board authorization to call a strike. 14 weeks and 2 days later, on February 10, 2008, the WGA calls for a vote to end the strike. On February 12, 2008, the strike ended. Now, the writers will receive distributor's gross and jurisdiction of the internet. They did not get animation reality. Now I'm going to talk about my target audience for my final podcast. Basically, it's going to be an educational podcast to inform those who did not know the issues of the strike and to inform those who did not understand why the writers went on strike. I'm going to hopefully get some interviews from some mass comm lawyers to get their input and their opinion of the Writers Guild and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. I also am going to get a lot of B-roll hopefully, and basically just everything I've gone over in previous podcasts I'm going to thoroughly go over in this next podcast. I'm going to use iMovie 8 because that's what's on my computer, and in general it's pretty, I think it's more simple than iMovie 6 in some ways, in others it's not. We'll see how that goes. You don't have to really mess with the audio and video matching up. It automatically does it for you. Also, I'm going to try and not use too many songs with words in it just to keep the podcast serious. And I imagine I will have some problems with finding a lot of B-roll just because I have in the past, and those are the problems I foresee. I hope that it comes out well, and I hope that everyone has enjoyed all my podcasts for this class. And I guess I will see you in a couple of weeks on my final podcast.
Last dance with Mary Jane. One more time to kill the pain.